As the sun shines on all of my glory, my flaws don't look so bad at all. What was I so afraid of?
Hey everybody, it's Sharmel. Welcome back to Locs, Lux Lifestyle. Welcome back to another video. So today I'm just here with an updated lock Q&A, and this is not really gonna be about like my locks specifically, more just about like the lock journey as a whole and just kind of like general questions and answers, just because for one, I don't think I've done like an actual lock Q&A in a while, and also I still get a lot of comments like on some of my older videos from the beginning of my lock journey, and I realized that, you know, not everyone has followed my journey from the beginning, or, you know, everyone who stumbles across my videos, they're not always subscribers and things like that. So I basically wanted to do just like a basic lock Q&A for those of you who may stumble across this video and you are interested in locks and you just wanted a little more information about like the process, and just like as an updated video where I can direct people to if they do have certain questions. So let's get into it. So first things first, let's start with a couple of disclaimers and just a little background about myself. So for one, I am not a professional, you guys. I don't market myself as a professional. I don't try to come off like I know everything about locks. Basically with my videos, I started my lock journey on my own, had very little information, did as much research as I can, and throughout this lock journey I have basically just kind of documented my process. So my content is really more so geared to like the women and ladies who like to DIY it up, right? Who don't mind experimenting and trying new things on their hair, or they just overall enjoy doing things with their own hair rather than paying someone else to do it. So I did start my locks myself back in 2020. So my locks are a little over 2 years old now. I started with 2-strand twists. I have about 68 locks in my head. I have maintained my locks at home throughout this entire process. Earlier this year, I installed lock extensions for about 6 months, and then I removed them. So I have definitely kind of dibbled and dabbled and tried a lot of things with my locks during this journey. All right, so now we're just going to move on to these questions. So the first question that I have been seeing pop up: are locks permanent? And at first, like, I wasn't even responding to comments like this, because for me it's like, what do you mean are locks permanent? But you know, there has been a lot of like videos of people combing out their locks and things like that, or people removing their locks, so I can understand like where the confusion comes in. So first things first, if you are interested in getting locks, you want to know if they're permanent, the short answer that I would give somebody is yes. If you go through like the traditional natural way of locking your hair, it is a process. On average, it takes about at least a year for someone's hair to fully lock, and in some cases it takes even longer than that. And even once your hair is like completely locked, it still takes some more time for your hair to really get like that matured look. And so the reason I say that they're permanent is because I feel like in order to get like the full payoff of like the actual process, you definitely have to dedicate some time to get that look. So on the basic level, I would say locks are permanent. Locks are not something that you can have today, wear for 2 weeks, go to a loose style for another month, and then return to like mature locks. Like, it doesn't work like that. Like, there is a process to get to mature locks. And if you don't want to think of them as permanent, I also like to say that they are a long-term hairstyle. However, with all that being said, if at any point in your lock journey you just feel like it's not working out and it's not for you, you can absolutely comb out your locks. Now, combing out your locks is a tedious process. It's not something that you could just sit down and knock out in a couple of hours, you know, depending on how many locks you have, depending on how mature your locks are. Like, there's different factors, but it is possible. I feel like for a long time there was this idea that if you got tired of your locks, you just automatically had to cut them off. Some people do cut them off because they just want to start completely fresh, but if you don't want to cut your hair off, but you want to remove your locks, you can absolutely comb them out. And also on some of my lock extensions videos, I get questions about if they're permanent or not. With lock extensions, it's pretty much a similar concept. So my lock extensions were temporarily permanent. So when I installed them with the intention to wear them for a long time. I personally wore mine for about 6 months. In some cases, people keep their lock extensions forever. In a lot of cases, people kind of trim at them and cut them as their natural locks begin to grow in. At any point, if you don't want the lock extensions anymore, you can absolutely remove them. Although I will recommend somebody going into their lock journey with the idea of locks being kind of permanent, you still get a lot of versatility and flexibility with your locks. Now, when it comes to the actual like starter lock process, there are actually a lot of different options that you can choose from to begin your journey. Like I said, the traditional ways, such as like coils, 2-strand twists, braid locks, those type of processes, they take a while. You have to go through like the full transformation of the frizzing, the budding, and all of that stuff. You know, it takes time for your hair to lock on its own. And if that's something that you don't feel like you have the time or the desire to commit yourself to, there are other options such as like instant locks, lock extensions like I mentioned. And those give you a more like instant look of locks, but even still, as your hair grows out of your scalp, your loose hair will still have to also go through like a lock process, which will happen with like regular maintenance and things like that. But you definitely have different options when it comes to locking your hair, and I would recommend doing research and finding out like which method, which process will work best for you. So the next thing I tend to get a lot of questions on is related to like maintenance. So first I'll start with like washing. How often should you wash your hair? So I personally wash my hair about every 2 to 3 weeks, and that's been the same schedule that I've been on since I started my locks. And even prior to starting my locks, when I had loose hair, I was still washing my hair about every 2 to 3 weeks. So that's my personal regimen. You don't have to wash your hair every 2 to 3 weeks, but I would recommend washing your hair at least once a month. I feel like on the basic bare minimum, you should be washing your locks at least once a month. And you know, I'm not gonna lie, sometimes I deviate from my schedule every now and then, but my preference of washing my locks is every 2 to 3 weeks. I would highly recommend you wash your locks at least once a month. And if you don't meet that once a month mark, I wouldn't go more than 6 weeks without washing your locks. The thing with locks is that they're just naturally more prone to build up regardless if you use products or not. But especially if you're using products on your locks, you definitely need to be making sure you wash your hair more frequently, more regularly. There's so much dust in the air that we don't realize. Depending on how long your hair is, it rubs up against your clothes, it rubs up against furniture, it's collecting dust, it's collecting lint and things of that nature. Even with loose hair, your hair is still prone to all those natural elements, but if you don't wash your loose hair, you can pick something out of it a lot easier. If you get something in your hair, you can comb it out of your loose hair a lot easier, even if you don't wash it. But with locks, you know, like our hair is literally locked together in like clusters. So with locks, I just personally feel like you have to kind of be more on top of those like wash routines, because like I said, locks are just naturally prone to build up. Another question I get or see often is how soon should you wash your starter locks? And I've seen a lot of crazy answers I've seen like a lot of varying opinions regarding this. So personally, I wash my starter locks at the 3-week mark. I actually have a video of me doing it, and not too long ago I got a comment on that video and someone was asking me like if I noticed any unraveling, if I felt like it slowed down my locking process, because her stylist told her not to wash her starter locks for 2 months if she wanted her hair to start locking. And the crazy thing is that that's not the first time I've seen something like that, where a stylist or people were telling people not to wash their starter locks for months. Like I said, I ain't no professional, but I personally do not agree with that. Like I said, the lock process as a whole is a lengthy process, right? You have to dedicate about a solid year to locking your hair. So washing your hair early on in your lock journey is really not going to slow down the process like you think it will. So I personally don't feel like it slowed down my locking process. It's a process, and the reality is that you're not gonna have full mature locks within 2 months. So I just feel like if your hair is itchy, if it's dirty, if you feel like you need to wash it, go ahead and wash your hair. I don't think that it really makes that huge of a difference. 2 months just seems really long without washing your hair. I'm more of a wash your hair at least a month type of person. So 2 months just seems like very long and unnecessary for me personally when it comes to starter locks. So yeah, when it comes to washing your starter locks, I think it's pretty similar to like the wash routine that I gave you. I think 2 to 3 weeks, if you feel like you want to wash your hair, go ahead and wash it. And once you reach that month mark, I think you should absolutely go ahead and wash your hair. No more than 6 weeks. Another question I often get in regards to maintenance is how often should you retwist your hair? So when it comes to retwisting, I would say it's more so dependent on like preference and lifestyle. So personally, I retwist about every 6 weeks. And I feel like 6 weeks is pretty standard for those of us who like a more styled look, who like, you know, cleaner parts. I think in general, a lot of people who like the clean part look, they follow more of like the 4 to 6 weeks rule. However, there are some people who go like months without a retwist. So it really depends on like the type of look you like for your locks. If you like a more manicured look, if you like a more fluffy root type of look. Lifestyle also plays a factor, just because the reality is that retwisting really doesn't last very long. So for some people who live like really active lives, they don't retwist very often just because it's kind of pointless. I also think it's depending on what your hair can personally handle. Someone with finer hair, a lower density of hair, they may not be able to handle getting their locks retwisted every 4 weeks because it would be too much tension on their hair, whereas somebody with thicker, fuller hair, they may be able to get theirs retwisted more often. So honestly, when it comes to retwisting, yeah, it's really based on what you want, the look that you want, what your hair can actually withstand, and then you can kind of plan it around there. But me personally, I stick to about every 6 weeks. Just like washing, sometimes I deviate from that a little bit. I think the longest I've gone without a retwist is about 8 weeks. That was personally a lot for me. But yeah, there's also people who go months or without retwisting, or they may only retwist like once or twice a year, and that also works for them. So you really, with retwisting, you have to find out what works for you and what your hair likes. I also get a lot of questions about like sizing and thin or smaller locks. So honestly, this is something that I personally wish I would have done more research on prior to locking my hair. So I always knew like the perimeter of my head was a lot finer than the center of my head, but I didn't realize how much of a difference it would make in how my hair would lock. So I definitely have locks around like my perimeter in the back that are a lot smaller than some of the locks like in the middle of my head. So when it comes to like the sizing and the thickness of your parts, that is something you want to be pretty aware of in the beginning, because how you part your hair, how you section off your hair for your locks will definitely impact the size and how your mature locks will look. So if you are someone with like finer hair or a lower density of hair, and if you want thicker locks, you definitely want to go with like bigger parts in sizing. You definitely want to take those things into consideration when you get your starter locks, especially if you're doing them yourself. If you are hesitant about getting the sizes right and making sure your lock to part ratio is right, I would recommend seeing a professional so that they can make sure it's parted off in a way that your hair will lock more cohesively in size once your locks start to transform and mature and things like that. If you are already well within your lock journey and you're noticing like some of your locks are a lot smaller than others, you can combine some locks. That's what I did. It did kind of throw off like my parting just a little bit, but I will say that my locks are more cohesive in size now. So yeah, that's kind of one of the trade-offs. You have to decide, like, do you want your locks to be thicker and more consistently, or do you just want more locks? Like, there's so many different factors that you have to consider, but I feel like ideally you want to make sure that your locks are thick and healthy to what your hair can handle. Just like I was saying before with the retwisting, you know, there's some people who hair can handle like really small locks and they're very strong. There's other people who need more thicker locks, or their locks are more prone to breakage. So these are just honest conversations that you have to have with yourself about what your hair is really capable of doing, and you have to set healthy expectations when it comes to your locks. Sometimes you have to sacrifice certain things, such as like the amount of locks that you have in your head, to just have an end result of good, strong, healthy locks. And then another thing I get asked about a lot is unraveling. If I had any unraveling, what to do with any unraveling. I think I've talked about this before. So I didn't experience a lot of unraveling, but I did have a little unraveling in some of my starter locks. Again, I started with 2-strand twists. So honestly, I feel like a little unraveling here and there is definitely pretty normal in the early stages of your lock journey. I often see questions asking like what to do to stop it. And I honestly feel like constantly retwisting it is honestly unnecessary. Definitely if you see a little unraveling, let's say within like the first couple weeks of your lock journey, definitely maybe touch it up here and there, but really you just have to allow your hair to go through the process. Like, there are ways to manipulate it to keep it from unraveling. If you have like a crochet hook, you can kind of gather the hair and crochet it together almost as if you were doing like an instant lock to kind of reinforce the hair sticking together. That's an option. But honestly, I personally feel like over time with regular maintenance, it will be trained and it will learn to basically stop unraveling. They will eventually find their way and kind of merge and lock together. And at any point, if they start to lock separately, like you kind of see, I forgot what is it, double hair dragging, what they call them, like where like the locks may have split kind of at the end. Again, you can go in with a crochet needle and combine them. So I personally wouldn't obsess over unraveling in the beginning stages, but if it is something that you are noticing, you know, months down the road, then you would take other necessary actions to kind of fix it. So yeah, that's pretty much like the main questions that I see a lot when it comes to like the lock journey, especially within like the starter lock phase. However, if you have any more questions or if you would like me to do like a follow-up Q&A, lock Q&A, then definitely let me know down in the comment section with your additional questions, because I can absolutely do that. But in general, when it comes to your lock journey, if you are choosing to go like the traditional natural route, you really just have to see the process through. I do feel like in the beginning of your lock journey, it's very exciting. You have all these different questions and things like that. If it's new to you, you know, your hair is doing things that you've never seen it done before. So I understand like where the questions kind of come from, but I will say before you start your lock journey, just make sure you do the proper research and that you know what you're getting yourself into. In general, I just feel like a lot of the questions are rooted in people trying to shortcut the lock journey process. And if that's your mindset, I would honestly recommend getting like instant locks or lock extensions. And I don't mean that in a shady way, because I'm someone who's dabbled in the lock extensions. I think people forget that that's an option, and they try to put themselves through this mental hurdle of going through the drawn out process when you don't have to do that. Because you see, I sometimes see questions about like frizz, and is my hair supposed to be doing this? Or how do I stop the frizz? How do I stop the unraveling? How do I stop the budding? Am I supposed to have budding? Is it supposed to be all this? Like, those are all natural functions of going through the natural process. And if that's not something that you want to do, then you do have other options. So yeah, just make sure you do your proper research and that you actually set healthy expectations for your hair. You know, you understand the process that your hair is gonna go through, and you understand what your hair is actually capable of doing. And overall, I do feel like when you do the proper research and you set healthy expectations, you know, it cuts back on any like anxious questions or over analyzing or overthinking like how your locks will turn out and look and all of those things. So that's gonna be it for this video, you guys. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoy lock content and videos like this, then make sure to subscribe to my channel, because I have so much lock content here for you guys, and I have so much more coming. So again, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Follow me on Instagram, Snatched by Sharmel, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye.